because some students are unable to attend today.
Right.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome. Maria Karen from Employability and Careers, and you're joining today for a session with Billy Dixon around the Resilience Project. We're delighted to have Billy here today. He's been doing a number of sessions over the week, so if you haven't already been to one, I'm sure you'll look to follow him after this and maybe attend other sessions. Before I hand over to Billy, I would just say to you is that as much as you can participate in this session, the better. Pop in questions, comments, views into the chat box. That would be great. Blackboard Collaborate, how it works. So once again, we're just looking at good net etiquette with regard to the use of kind of wording, etc., and what you post up there as well. So if you could just put yourself on mute, and if you'd like to, and it's good once again to get used to putting ourselves on camera as well, that's useful. So once again, please try and use the chat box, and I'm now just going to pass you over to Billy. Billy, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for tuning in to watch this particular session, because it's one of these sessions that's very, very dear to my heart. Resilience, I find, is without doubt the key to success. You could be the most gifted, talented person in the world, but if you haven't got the resilience to take the knocks, the setbacks, then success is going to be very, very limited indeed. In fact, Harvard University said it's more important than education. It's more important than training or experience. And I would agree with that. I've worked extensively with sports teams and with politicians, and the most resilient ones are the most successful ones. Not always the most gifted ones who get the success, but the most resilient ones have a better chance. So it is one of these things, and it's talked about at great length by various individuals in the media. And I find it very, very frustrating, because one of the things they always say about resilience is you have to change your thinking. And I always go, well, tell me how to do that. You see, resilience, it's every single one of us, let's be frank, are going to get setbacks. There's no ifs or buts about that. And I read a PhD study recently, and it said that the average person will get eight major setbacks in life. And where I struggle with that, I think some setbacks are much more life-changing than others. And then the other thing, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. And I go, really? I've seen people's lives devastated by certain things. So sometimes it does make you weaker. But it's how you deal with these things that will determine the path that you take from here on in. And the reason I find this subject a passion was a number of years ago. I was working abroad, and I came back from abroad, and I was doing a medical conference in Newcastle upon Tyne. And at the end of the conference, this consultant came up to me and says, Billy, you're very, very seriously ill. And that night I was in a life support machine struggling for my life. And what had happened, somehow, a toxin had got into my body. Now, they think it could have been raspberries, because there was a series in the country that I was in, other people had died, and they attributed, not quite sure, to these things, the raspberries. And this toxin attacked my liver, and it attacked my brain. Now, I don't drink, I don't smoke, so it was nothing to do with alcohol or any of those things. It was this toxin. So my liver and brain were basically sozzled, and I was out of action for over a year. But 3 months of that, I had to be put in suicide watch because of the effect that this toxin had in my brain. So whenever people talk about resilience, they really need to know what they're talking about. And yet I had people coming to me, come on, Billy, think positive. And I'm going, all I wanted to do at the time was take a baseball bat to them. So this thing that you can change your thinking, and I'll tell you now, everybody I've talked to, anybody who's been down, and I'm talking about really down, I'm not talking about just having a bad day, I'm talking about depression. Anybody who's been down and really struggling, or had a real bad setback, The one thing you cannot do in a situation like that is change your thinking. That's just one of those facts of life. Because you're struggling to survive and you're maybe living day by day. In some cases, you're living minute by minute just to survive the next minute. And I used to find that what I would do when I finally made it home, that I'd come down in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep. And I'd put on the television at full volume just to kill the noise in my head. So how do you change your thinking? So let's deal with the facts here. The first one that I would like to deal with is this nonsense of positive thinking. This is all you read about. And everybody says you have to think positive. It's about positive thinking, and it's just bandied around so casually. And yet people don't understand the principle of positive thinking. Positive thinking can be very, very dangerous. I've seen sports teams who are not allowed to think negatively, and they go onto the field and something goes wrong and they can't deal with it. Why? Because all they can think of is positive. So let's deal with the facts about the brain. Number one, the human brain is wired to be negative and positive. That is a fact. The human brain responds more to negative stimuli than it does to positive stimuli. That is also a fact. Now, the reason for that is very, very simple. You cannot survive unless you think negatively. Now, why I say that, if you go down the town today and you're crossing the street, you do not come up to the curb and say, I'm positive I'll get across here, and you just straight out in front of a car. What you do, you stop, you look for danger. If there's no danger coming, then you take positive action. You have to think negatively to survive. You have to look for dangers. You have to look for threats. When you're doing your driving lessons and you're doing your driving test, what do they teach you? Where is the danger coming from? So you have to think negatively. Right? That's why we think negatively. It comes from hunting gathering days. When we're out hunting together, where's the danger coming from? We're always on the alert. So from that perspective, when people talk about positive thinking, they have to always also take into account negative thinking. Now, some people, due to their personality, will have a negative bias to their brain or a positive bias to their brain. I'd be the latter. I rush into things and then go, I should have thought of that. Other people will not rush into things and wish they had done. So that's personality type. However, I think there are three types of thinkers. Now, see which one of these you think you are. Number one, the positive thinker, the person who's read the self-help book. They come into college or university or work one day and they're dosed with the cold. The nose is running, their eyes are streaming, they're coughing up their lungs, and you ask them how they are and they go, I'm great. They're not, they're giving it everybody and should be put down. That's the positive thinker, right? They don't look at reality. Second one, and everybody knows these. This is the negative thinker. And the negative thinker is the person who sits and moans and groans, accepts responsibility for nothing, but you know what? It's everybody else's fault. We all know someone or some people who are like that. Every family has them, and that's the negative thinker. Third one is positive attitude. And positive attitude is a pure common sense. Positive attitude says, right, what's the worst can happen? Let's prepare for that. What's the best can happen? Let's prepare for that. That is positive attitude. What positive attitude says, I've made a mistake here. Right, how do I fix this? How can I do better next time? That's positive attitude. So instead of beating yourself up when you do something wrong, it says, right, how do I do this better the next time? So that is positive attitude. It's like whenever my kids, funny enough, there's one of them at the Ulster University in his second year, and whenever they were waiting for their A-level results, I said to both of them, what happens if you don't do well? And both of them said, if we don't do well, we're going to do this, 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 and this. And we got that all planned. What happens if you do well? I'm going to go to this university to do this course. We got all that planned. So no matter what happened, they were prepared. So no matter what happened, they weren't going to be failures. And that's what I mean by positive attitude. It's a much more healthy way to think. And it gives you ways out. Now, let's deal with resilience. You're feeling low. You're going through a bit of a time where you're struggling. How do you deal with it? And resilience, people are not born, but some people think people are born with resilience. I'm not quite sure. Is it part of your DNA? I think an awful lot of it is to do with nurture, and how you're brought up and how you relate to the world. But what's making it more and more difficult now is the effect that some of the social media comments are having on your generation. Not so much mine, because we are still Luddites in all of this here and still struggle to know what button to push. So really, it's the younger generation. They're saying that their resilience is going down because of social media. And one of the things that really, really frustrates me is I keep hearing this comment about the snowflake generation. And that makes me really angry. You are not the snowflake generation. It's just generational things have changed. And what you're doing now, we didn't do. And what we did, the previous generation didn't do. So it is simply a generational thing. But resilience is being diminished because of social media. So how do you maintain your resilience? How do you build it? How do you make yourself mentally stronger? You're feeling low, you're being challenged, you go through a hard time. How do you deal with it? I was lying in the hospital bed one day and this patient walked past, and it was my eureka moment. And I watched this person as they walked, and the head was down, the shoulders were down, they were shuffling along, they weren't saying anything to anybody. A real sorry sight. And I realized I had been doing exactly the same thing. You have the pole with the drip on it and you're trailing along and you're feeling really sorry for yourself. And that got me thinking. I knew at that stage I couldn't change my thinking. When I saw that, I realized what was going on. Because in my head, I'm sick. So therefore, I have to act sick. I have to look sick. I knew I couldn't change my thinking, but you know what I could do? I could change my behavior. I didn't have to listen to my head. So from then on in, I forced myself to straighten up, to keep my head up, to look people in the eye, to smile even though I didn't feel like it, and lift my feet when I walked. And by doing that, gradually what happened, my attitude followed. Now, if you remember only 3 words about this presentation, I want you to take these 3 words away today and spread them all around the world. Behavior changes attitude. They are 3 of the most powerful words that you will hear. Behavior changes attitude. Now, I'll be frank with you. I would not be sitting here talking to you here today if I hadn't done that. I was told 9 years ago I'd be on antidepressants for the rest of my life. I haven't touched one in over 8 years. By doing this, by changing my behaviors, my attitude has followed. And I still have my dark days. I still go into places where I don't want to be, but I always do this and I get out of it very, very quickly. It doesn't last anymore. I'd be down maybe for 1 day, but no longer. Thankfully, touch wood. Okay, so, and by the way, nobody's immune to this. Nobody's immune to depression. Nobody is immune to being challenged. So this is why this is important. Behavior changes attitude. Now, isn't it interesting that the #1 treatment for depression today is behavioral therapy. Marry that with cognitive behavioral therapy, then you have an enormously powerful tool. But behavioral therapy is so easy. Now, think about this. What are your routines? Do you follow a routine every day? Most people do. Think about when you get up in the morning, how do you get out of the house? You follow a routine, and that routine seldom, if ever, changes. Now, there will be people who are listening to this today who will be right-leggers or left-leggers. Now, this has got nothing to do with religion. When you're putting your underpants on in the morning, do you put your left leg in first or your right leg in first? Some people say I put both legs in at once. Brilliant. What I'm trying to say, see, tomorrow morning, put the opposite leg in first. Because all they do with behavior therapy, they get you to write down what your routines are, because those routines are reinforcing current attitudes. And then what they get you to do, change those routines. Now, how good is that? And that's behavioral therapy. Right? And behavioral therapy is maybe, okay, I'm going to take up jogging, or I'm going to go to the gym. That's a change of behavior. Instead of taking the lift up to the next floor, I'm going to take the stairs. That's behavioral changes. Behavior changes attitude. Right? I'm going to bring flowers into the house to brighten the place up. That is behavioral therapy. So anything that changes how any behavior that you can change will help to change your thinking. However, what I'm going to do is give you a list of things that definitely work. This is your toolkit. This is something that you can do every single day. Every single one of you can do this every single day. And you know what? Other people will react to it. Now, that's the thing you have to remember, that your behaviors not only affect you, they affect everybody else around you. Now, I'm sure that everybody here has been at a function or at an event and everybody's nice and happy and relaxed, and then the miserable person turns in. And in that instant, everything changes because of one person's behavior. So behavior changes attitude. So this is your toolkit. Okay, so here we go. Number one, posture. Now, there's a lot of research. In fact, there's masses and masses of this. And what happens when you change your posture, it changes the flow of neurons in your brain. A lot of neuroscience have looked and put little sensors in the head and have watched the flow of neurons in people change. And posture has one of the biggest effects on how we think. Because our instinct to do when we're depressed is to bring everything this way. And then what happens, the internal organs all curl in as well, and you can't breathe as well, not enough oxygen getting to the brain, so therefore you're being pulled down. By changing posture and nice and relaxed and getting your breathing done properly into the diaphragm, then the flow of neurons start to change. And it's amazing how good that makes you feel. So there's the first one. It's a simple one. And by the way, the very first thing that one human being notices about another is always their posture. We look to see somebody else, is this person a threat to me or not? And this ties in with confidence, because confidence ties in with resilience, by the way. And if any of you who are on the confidence session that I did will know that a relaxed, upright posture says confidence. So that's the first one. The second one is how you walk. Walk with purpose. No hands in pockets and no arms folded in front of you, because they are submissive gestures. If you watch politicians, I've been fortunate enough to choreograph some political events. And one of the things we always do to the politicians, we say to the female politicians, please do not walk with your arms folded, and to the male politicians, do not put your hands in your pockets, because these are submissive gestures. You send all the people, I'm not going to attack and I'm not going to defend. Whereas if you're swinging your arms in a positive way, it makes you look more powerful, but it makes you feel better as well. Okay, so how you walk has a big impact on how you feel about yourself as well. There's two: posture, walk. Number three is the most important interpersonal skill that you have at your disposal. Because when we're not well, or when we're challenged, or when we're depressed, one of the things we tend to do is stop making eye contact. And you'll see this all the time. Force yourself to look up, make eye contact. It does two things. It connects you with other people. So now your world is starting to come out. And secondly, you're acknowledging the other person. And one of our human needs, not a desire or a want, is acknowledgement. And one of the simplest ways to acknowledge a person is simply to make eye contact with them. The next one is a smile. Confident people always have a smile on their face. Now, this does not mean you walk around like the village idiot. It simply means you smile from within. And then what that does, that relaxes the face. But what it does inside, it just changes how you feel. And it takes away excuses. The next one I absolutely love. And it's called tone of voice. Now, have you noticed in Northern Ireland, we're a bit like that there? How you doing today? Ah, I'm hanging together. It's going to rain later on tonight, you know. How many tablets are you on? How often have you heard comments like this here? We're a bit flat and we're a bit like this here. Whereas if you change the tone of voice, all of a sudden, the flow of neurons in your brain change dramatically. It's one of the best things to do, is change the tone of voice. It has a major impact on everyone around you, because all of a sudden you're coming across as enthusiastic. And enthusiasm and passion is infectious. So, tone of voice. And then the last one, the sixth one, your appearance. Now, if you've been on the previous session I did earlier on today, we covered this in depth about how your physical appearance has a major impact on the perception, how you're perceived by other people. And absolutely true. But not only has that physical appearance got an impact on other people, it has a real impact on yourself, because we all put on things and it makes us feel different. Have you noticed that? When you put on certain things, all of a sudden, you think differently. I mean, I have a small home gym. And when I train it, I put my training kit on. I could train on anything. I could go in my day clothes, my pajamas, I could train. But I put my training kit on. Why? Because it puts me in the right frame of mind. If I'm going to meetings, I put on certain things. And you are exactly the same. To such an extent that GPs now monitor people when they come in and they look at their physical appearance, because their physical appearance can have helps with their diagnosis. Interesting. So your physical appearance, in other words, how you dress yourself, can have a major impact on how you feel and how other people react to you around you. So that's your basic one. So you need to be asking yourself now, what behaviors could I change when I'm low? And then also ask yourself, whenever I'm down, what way do I behave? Just think about that for a moment. When I'm down, what way do I behave? Do I slump in the chair and just watch TV? Do I go into the cupboard and eat 10 packets of crisps? What do you do when you're feeling really low? What are your behaviors? And you'll find that those behaviors reinforce how you feel. Whereas what you need to be doing is doing a behavior which does the opposite. I hope that little bit has helped, because I think that is so, so important. Now, added to that, this is also behavior, because you'll find, and I'm speaking, this is all from experience, by the way, and I found whenever I was in that dark place, the little voice in my head was unbelievably negative. You see, self-talk, that inner voice, we all do self-talk. And it can either be positive or it can be negative. Now, because of what's been going on this last year or so with COVID and with lockdown, what has happened, we are being inundated with negativity. It's coming at us from all angles. And that's reinforced by our situation, where you might not been able to get out, you haven't been mixing with your friends, you haven't been able to get to university, to the classes, and live a proper university life. My stepdaughter, she hasn't had her graduation and probably won't have one, as is over a year ago. So all of that feeds in to that inner voice, and that inner voice then gets more and more negative. So therefore, with some people, that inner voice is all negative, and that is very, very destructive. And this is also a behavior, by the way, so that people think, oh, this is something you're changing your thinking. No, you're not. You're actually changing a behavior here. You're telling your voice to change. So things to remember. Every piece of research shows that people who have a predominantly negative little voice, in other words, self-talk is predominantly negative, are less successful than people whose voice is predominantly positive. Now, let's be very, very frank here. All of us will be negative at some stage. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm simply saying be aware of it. And once you're aware of it, then you can do something to control it. So that's the first thing. Try to switch that. Try to take that negativity and turn it positive. So things like, do not get involved in gossip. Do not get involved in criticism. And the way I do that, I'm not a particularly religious person, but the way I do this is something I learned as a child. Judge not, lest ye be judged. It's an old saying, taken from the Bible, I know, but you know what? What that does, that stops me thinking negativity about other people. Because I think if you think negative about others and you start to criticize others, it always comes back on you. Now, that little voice in your head, there's a right way and a wrong way to talk. If you do your interpersonal skills course, for those of you who are doing confidence with me, you'll have heard this, that if you talk in the first party all the time, in other words, I, me, my, and mine, people are less likely to trust you and more likely to challenge you. Believe it or not, it's exactly the same if you do the same thing in your head. If you're constantly saying, I am this, I am that, I can do this, I can do that, that can have a huge impact, negative impact on your thinking. So the way it is recommended that you talk to yourself as if you are talking to a friend. So instead of saying I, you're going, okay, Billy, this is what you need to be doing today, or this is what you should have done, but you're talking to yourself in the third party is the way I would describe it. So you can call yourself you can call yourself by your name. I call myself by my name. Okay, Billy, this is what you need to be doing. So third party, talk to yourself as if you're talking to a friend. And you'll find that that will have a much more positive outcome. So that's the first thing. Secondly, when you are talking to yourself, don't use general statements. Now, what I mean by this, people, when they criticize them, will say, oh, I'm useless at maths. And that's a general statement. That's just saying right across the board, I can't do any maths whatsoever. So therefore, what they do, they just write the whole subject off because of that one statement. And that statement will stay with them throughout their entire life. And I found, whenever I was young, I'm dyslexic. And I only discovered I was dyslexic when I first started this business. Up until then, I was thick and stupid. Now I'm thick, stupid, and dyslexic as well. So there you go. So what I found I couldn't do maths at all. And what I subsequently discovered when I started studying accountancy, which I discovered I was really good at, addition, I was really, really good at. And working out the percentages, I was really, really good at. And yet I had written myself off in maths, but there was a section of maths that I could do exceptionally well. So that's why you don't use general statements. So if you're going to say something about yourself, just say, I'm not particularly good at this particular area. Now that's different. I'm not particularly good at this particular area. Another thing, if you're going, for example, and you're doing something, don't say, I will, or you will. What I mean by that, if I go to the gym today and I want to do bench press, and say I put 80 kilos in the bar, and I lie underneath the bar and say, okay, Dixon, you're going to do 80 kilograms. And I lift it off and it goes down and I cannot move it. Because I've said the word will do it, I have failed. And so therefore, in my head, I am now a failure. But if I take another approach and I can say, okay, Billy, you can do 80 kilos. And I lift it off and it comes down and I can't get up. Well, it just means I can't do it at that moment in time, but I can do it. So instead of being a failure now, I've left myself some wriggle room. So please don't say the word will. I will do something, or you will do something. Because if you don't do it, then it's a fail. So self-talk, very important, very, very important. Another thing that people swear by are mantras. I have done them, and some people swear by them, others find them a total waste of time, and I think the truth lies in between somewhere. If it works for you, please, please do it. And what a mantra is reinforcing a message in your own head. And some people will look in the mirror, I am beautiful. Well, I would always say, don't say I am beautiful, I would say you are beautiful, as if you're talking to a friend. Okay, so do it from the third party because it has more power. Okay, because you do it from the first party, then it doesn't have the same impact. However, I'll tell you this story. I remember years ago, I thought, I'm really going to do this. And I was training for a competition at the time, and I used to get up in the mornings and look in the mirror and go, I'm a winner, I'm a winner, I'm a winner. Okay? And apparently if you do this often enough with it, and this is what I remember I was reading at the time, you become a winner. So if I was to get everybody here to go, I'm a winner, I'm a winner, I'm a winner, and then get you to put your hands up, and many people think they're a winner, nah. But if I told you, I mean, if you felt right pillock doing it, that would be a different thing. And I remember I did this, and then one day I was driving to work and I hit the curb and I cursed. And in that moment, all the I'm the winners were destroyed because of that. So in that case, it didn't work. So I'm not sure about mantras. Some people love them, others hate them. I'm neutral on the subject. Okay, so I will leave that one entirely up to yourself. Another one, and this is a really big one, people believe in visualization. And so do I, to an extent, and I need to qualify this. And the case study that is thrown out to everybody is there were two basketball teams. And one basketball team spent the week throwing hoops. and maybe 8 out of 10 hoops would go in. So they had 2 misses, and that would play on their minds. But they practiced and practiced and practiced throwing hoops, and they got better, I suppose. The other team for the full week never went onto the court, and they just lay about and they visualized throwing hoops. And their visualization, every hoop, every ball went into the hoop. And then when they played the match, according to the reports, the team that didn't go onto the court and did it through visualization won the match easily. That never happened. That's a myth. It was made up by somebody who is promoting his ideas on visualization. That experiment never ever took place. So visualization on its own does not work, and that is proven beyond any reasonable doubt. But visualization alongside action does work. So if you practice something and then visualize it afterwards, you get better at it. But it only works in conjunction with action. Does that make sense to everyone? And I love visualization, but it only works in conjunction with action. Now, let's see where I am here. Okay. Many years ago, I coached this man who mentally is probably the strongest individual I've ever met. And he was head of all the social workers in Northern Ireland. And he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And the consultant said to Martin, you have a maximum of 9 months. And Martin looked back at the consultant. He says, I will accept the disease because I know I can do nothing about that. He says, but I'm not accepting the time. This cancer had gone into his pancreas, into his liver, and into his bones. There was no chance this man was going to survive. He lived 9 years after his diagnosis. And him and I used to have very long conversations. And he said, what you have to understand, Billy, all of us have a psychological anchor. He says, when you're down and when you're in a bad place, you always revert to your psychological anchor. And he says, what you have to do is to change that anchor. And my anchor, I grew up in an area where my family had a bit of a reputation, and you get tarred with the same brush. In fact, the very first day I started primary school, my headmaster took me in, caned me, and told me I was scum. So I went to another primary school. So it was about 4 or 5 different primary schools. And I always remember one of the teachers saying, Dixon, you'll go nowhere because you're thick and stupid. And that was my psychological anchor about 20 years ago. And anytime anything went wrong in my life, I would always go back to that and say, Dixon, you're just thick and stupid. You deserve it. And I've thankfully been able to change that. And it's not knowing that can do the damage. Once you realize, yes, I have a psychological anchor, then you can do something about it. It's the not knowing that causes the damage. Martin's psychological anchor at that stage was his disease and his impending death. And what was happening? His friends and family were coming to visit him. How are you doing today, Martin? Oh, you're not looking too bad today. Now, they mean well, but what they're actually doing is reinforcing the fact that he's ill. They're making him think in. Okay, there's the first one. Then he couldn't work, and because he no longer had a job, he's now sitting around feeling sorry for himself and thinking in. He had to have treatments every day. The nurse would come either in the morning or the late afternoon. He wasn't sure what time she was coming at. As long as he's waiting for the nurse, he's still thinking about his disease. The worst thing he had to cope with were huge setbacks. And every setback made him think this way. And you see, therein lies the problem. Because people who think in all of the time and make themselves the victim and think, poor little old me. They're the people who lack confidence, who lack resilience, who struggle with their mental health, and unfortunately, some of them take their own lives. Now, let's be frank, it is okay and normal to feel down and feel sorry for yourself some of the time. We all do it, and thinking in is part of that. And that is natural and sometimes can be healthy, but not continually. If you're continually thinking like this here, then it can do damage. I always remember a girl that I used to teach, her parents got attention because they were always ill. Now, whether they were or not, I'm not sure, but that's how they got attention. So this family were brought up in a sick house, if you like. This girl says, I've got MS. She went to the hospital. All the diagnosis said she didn't have MS. She did, and she didn't have MS. But she convinced herself she had MS. She ended up in a wheelchair, and she died in her early 30s. And the doctors to this day believe that it was here rather than any physical condition. And that's the power of the mind. The mind can be unbelievably powerful. But I'm saying is it's okay to think like this now and again, but not continuously. This is what Martin said helped him. He said to his friends and family, when you come to my house, you don't ask me how I am. We don't talk about my disease. We sit here, we'll have a bit of crack and a drop of drink. And he says, bring it. And now what's happening, he's thinking out the way. If you remember, he had lost his job. What he did, he started a discussion group in our local hospital for terminal cancer sufferers. It started off as once a month, became once a fortnight. Now is once a week. The speakers were brought from literally all around the place. And his model has been set up throughout the United Kingdom and Ireland. He was thinking out. He had a fight with the trust and he had a bit of influence. The nurse was at his house every morning at 8:30 to do it, and that left him the rest of the day to do what he wanted. He's now thinking out. Every setback, he used what he called distraction therapy. He wrote a book, he published a play. A man who voted Republican became one of the world's experts on the Orange Order, which I love the irony of. And research companies used to come from all over the world to find out about the Orange Order from him. He became one of the foremost experts on the Masonic Order. He became this, he became that, he did degrees. In other words, he always distracted himself. People with resilience and confidence and stronger mental health all have one thing in common. Predominantly, they think that way. They think out. And that's the way you need to be thinking. Right? Because once you start feeling sorry for yourself, that's on the slippery slope. And the other thing to remember, always be aware of stress. Now, stress is normal and some stress is actually very healthy. But you have to work out what level of stress on you is right and what level of stress on you is wrong. And if you don't do something about that, then you could be slipping down into this black hole and you don't even know what's happening. I mean, I really, really worry for the people who are working in the NHS. I really worry for them. I remember doing something for ward managers, or sisters as the public would call them. And they walked in and 3 of them just put their head in their hands and burst into tears. Why? Because they're under so much stress and pressure that they reach breaking point. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. So stress needs to be managed. And how do you manage this thing called stress? Well, here's one of the things. Out of Martin's experience, we designed this audit, and everybody can do this. It's a bit of fun, but you know what? It's very, very serious. There are some people and you will have in your life who make you feel brilliant and energize you. And then there are other people in your life who just drain all the energy out of you. So what we get people to do is make a list. Just take a piece of paper, divide it in two, and make a list. Who are all the people in your life who energize you? Who are all the people in your life who de-energize you? Have a think about that. And if you have a pen and paper to hand, just do it. Who are the people in your life who energize you? Who are the people in your life who de-energize you? I see a question here. What level of stress on you is right and what is wrong? There's no answer to that, because some people can take an awful lot more stress than others, by the way, just whenever I see that. I can't take the stress I used to. Whenever I was younger, I could take an awful lot, so I can't do it anymore. So, who are the people who energize you? Who are the people who de-energize you? And then the question you have to ask yourself, who are the people I spend most time with? Because here's the thing. If you're spending more time with people who de-energize you than energize you, then these are going to just pull you down. Okay? They're going to pull you down. So at the end of the day or the end of the week, now I know, by the way, before I have to be realistic here, you have to spend time with people who are negative and who de-energize. I mean, my best friend, I've known from I was 3-year-old, the godfather to my 2 children, most negative man I've ever known. And he comes into my house. If you remember last May, it was really sunny and beautiful. And he drove up to my door, and he gets out of the car, locks it 4 times, you know, one of those people, checks it, locks it, checks it, locks it. I said to him, "Hiya, Ken, boy, it's not a brilliant day." And his answer was, "Oh, but the long range forecast bad." Coming into June now, I will guarantee at the start of June, Ken will be saying to me, "Days will be on the turn soon." So he's always negative, okay? And you have to spend time with people like that. That's fine. But at the end of the day or the end of the week, you must have more energy coming in than going out. And I have made a conscious decision, especially since what happened to me. I have eliminated practically all negative people from my life, with the exception of Ken. Okay, because he's honest, he's loyal, he's dependable. But all other negative people, I will keep at arm's length. I don't want to hear negative talk. I don't want to hear gossip. I don't want any of that nonsense. Okay. So, somebody says, what if the person does a bit of both? Yep, most people do. But if they're aware of this here, then what will happen? They'll go towards more the positive. Because one of the things I get people to say is, if other people were putting your name down there, what side would they put you on? And let's be honest, a few years ago, I'd have been on both sides. Yeah. Now, when you have that done, draw a line underneath that. And then write down all the things that you do that energize you and all the things that de-energize you. Now, some people, for example, will find ironing therapeutic. Others find it a real de-energizer. Okay, but what are the things? Now, the reason I get people to do this, everybody has something that makes them, and does something that makes them feel good. And if you stop doing those things, then you're going to go down. Sure as God made little green apple, you are going to go down. So you always have to have something in your life and do something that you really enjoy and gives you that lift. And science has looked at this, and these are the ones that definitely work. Exercise. I don't care what type of exercise it is, exercise helps. Helping others. Helping other people is a big plus. Now, I'll put a proviso in here. Just be wary. You can help too much, and then you can end up suffering from compassion fatigue, and that will have the opposite effect. So just be aware of that. Learning something new is a great way to improve how you feel. Meditation, some people love it, others think it's mumbo jumbo. I personally like it. Music definitely works. Reading works. Getting out into nature works. Sun exposure. a day like today, you need 20 minutes exposure on your skin. After that, put your sunblock on, but 20 minutes, you need that to help. So those are the things that definitely help. Okay. Now, are there any questions up until this point? And then I'll finish off with one thing that I would definitely recommend. Okay, just very quickly, if all else fails and you really are struggling, or you've gone through an event and it's really dented your morale or your self-belief, or you've made a mistake and you're beating yourself up, there's one thing you can do, and I'll stake my reputation on this one. It's a 3-step process. And you can only do this with pen and paper. You can't do it on a tablet or a phone or whatever. You have to write it down. And the reason you write it down is because when you write down something about yourself, you find it very difficult to tell lies about yourself. You tend to always tell the truth. That's why you do this. Step number 1, you write down what is causing your anxiety or your depression, or what is the mistake that you have made, what is the event that you're going through. And this is called admission. What you're actually doing is admitting there is something wrong. So that is step number 1. You write that down. Step number 2 is the really important bit. Because when something happens in your life, all of those thoughts go into your brain and they spin around like a washing machine, and then start plucking other stuff out of the air, which is irrelevant and is out of context, but then the thing gets exaggerated and bigger and bigger. By doing the next step, you get rid of all of that, because what you write down exactly how this is making you feel or has made you feel. You write down your emotions. And by writing it down, it gets rid of all the nonsense, because you only put down what is relevant. And when you have that stage done, that is when you find someone you can talk to, and who is non-judgmental and is definitely will not share it with anybody else. Okay, that's when you talk to someone. So that is step number 2. Step number 3, you will always hear, we should learn from our mistakes. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people do not learn from their mistakes, which is why you do number 3. You write down what you have learned or are learning from this experience. Now, I literally have a little book that I carry around with me with all of that in it. Any events that have happened to me in the past, I have them all recorded in those 3 steps. It's a technique used by therapists, by the way. A very successful technique. So let's go right back to the start again, because we said resilience is one of these things that is talked about but misunderstood. And when you're down, when you're feeling vulnerable, it is very difficult to change your thinking. But what you can do is change your behavior. And please take those 3 words away today. Behavior changes attitude. Because those 3 words could save someone's life. Can I thank you for tuning in to listen to this today? And if you have any questions, please ask at this stage, because I feel that this is such an important subject.
I think you've had quite a few questions through there. There's a final one maybe in from Kathleen.
Oh, that's really good, yes. Negative reinforcing is because it's the norm for you, it's your comfort zone, and we do it, and that's why we retreat into what's comfortable. And for some people, negative reinforcement behaviors, like eating crisps and things, it is comforting, and that's why we revert to it. And that's why you really have to force yourself in a situation to stop doing that. Yeah, I mean, that is a lot of people fall into that. Thank you, Kathleen. It's a very insightful question. That well done.
Okay, but I'm just a wee bit conscious of time, and I was just looking while you were speaking there, doing the summary at some of the hopes and expectations that people had put in when they signed up for the session today, and I think certainly everything you've covered today and the questions that you've answered have addressed those. I mean, people were asking really about things like how to discover how best to look after their mental health, getting them ways of reducing negative internal voice, gaining a new perspective, and also applying it to the workplace, but everyday life. So I think those objectives have been very well achieved today. So we thank you very much for taking the time and inspiring us to kind of move one step forward with some lovely little kind of 6 points, which Rachel has been very kind to upload into the chat box for students to go away with and think about.
Yeah, great. Okay.
The last thing I maybe just do now is to share with the rest of the group here the final slide, which kind of talks about other sessions that we're running, just so that people don't kind of miss out. So we have a session today here at 2 p.m. It's the Northern Ireland Women's Football Team. We also have a session tomorrow, David Mead, Unlock Your Future Potential. The other things maybe to be aware of as well as part of the Future Skills Week and right throughout the summer, because staff will be here to support you, is there is that online one-to-one support. But can I just draw your attention to the main website for the Skills Week? If you're seeking a placement or graduate role, there are lots still available for you to apply to. And if you can follow us on social media as well. So thanks ever so much for taking the time today to join us. Hope you've got lots from it, and hope you can take part in events running for the rest of the week. So well done to you for turning up, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, have a great day, everybody.
Thanks very much, Billy.
Okay, bye-bye.